How I changed my negative behavior. I've previously shared in another one of my videos how I manage my mind, but I purposely left out how I deal with more challenging, undesirable thoughts. For me, the narrative in my head tends to become negative when I feel anxiety from stressful situations. This unwanted behavior is very reactive, meaning something outside of me triggers the negative reaction in me, and before I know it, I'm behaving frustrated or even angry. However, I found a way to undo some of the reactionary thoughts and behaviors by focusing on the narrative in my head, meaning the thoughts that were going on in there when I become frustrated or angry. I'm not a psychologist, but the following is what worked for me. I've attempted to change many of my ugly behaviors, which begin with unwanted thought patterns, and have had some success by working to just observe the negative thought stream in my brain before and if it is triggered into an undesirable behavior, such as acting frustrated or getting angry. The practice of observing my thoughts really helped me when I could observe and not get caught up to the point of reacting or following the negative thinking in my head. However, this didn't always work for me with specific situations because my mind would explode in the frustration or anger before I was even aware of what was happening. These specific situations and resulting undesirable reactions were too challenging for me to overcome by solely observing what my mind was saying while attempting not to react. That is when I tried something different, changing the narrative in my head. I found that if I reframe my thoughts about specific situations that trigger my brain, I could then work to replace the undesirable story in my head with the desired narrative and resulting response. The first step was to come up with the new thoughts to replace the old thought patterns. Then I reminded myself of these each morning. When confronted with a situation that can become an emotional trigger for me, I would then focus my thinking to the new narrative, how I wanted to think. In the beginning, the best I could do was remind myself of how I wanted to think after the reaction. But gradually I became able to remind myself about the new narrative before the reaction occurred, and those positive thoughts began to drown out the old narrative. Eventually, the new narrative would either pop up on its own when triggered, or is no longer triggered into a fit of frustration or anger. My thoughts about that situation had completely changed. Here are some examples of how this worked for me in specific scenarios. Let's talk the McDonald's drive-through line. Sounds goofy, right? I'd say 85% of the time I pulled into a McDonald's restaurant in the morning to grab a coffee, I used to complain about how long the line was, turn my car around, then leave. I would not wait. But why? Well, this required a bit of self-examination of what was going on in my brain. My mind was telling me I needed to rush, so I was always in a hurry. But taking a step back, I realized there was really very few times that I needed to be in a hurry. I conditioned my brain to think so, but it was not true. So this became my new narrative. I'm not in a hurry, there's no place else I need to be. Once I had my new narrative, all I had to do was practice it. So whenever I go to McDonald's and I see the long line, if my brain points out how long the line is, I simply think to myself, I'm not in a hurry. There's no place else I need to be. Boom. I'm now calm, patient, and oftentimes I find the long line actually moves pretty darn fast at Mickey D's. I could get really mad at other drivers, sometimes almost to the point of road rage. My mind was telling me that other drivers were speeding too fast, cutting me off, being inconsiderate, etc. This often led me to become frustrated and angry at other cars. I say other cars because I eventually recognized that the story in my head was not allowing me to be compassionate toward other people. So I chose to see other cars and drivers as people. I made them personal to me by choosing to see them as my sons and daughter, whom I dearly love and treat kindly. Each morning I began reminding myself of this before getting in my car. Whenever I would feel the emotional trigger and begin to hear the narrative in my head, I would begin telling myself this new story. That is my son or my daughter driving there, and I'm not upset with him or her. He or she's doing his or her best. This usually makes me laugh a little bit and smile. It calms me down right away. I found that choosing someone I'm really fond of and repeatedly imagining they are in that other car really helped me overcome some of this behavior quickly. I've become more patient and less reactive to other drivers. I was a bit self-centered and not always willing to do what others wanted to do. I was resistant, and if I paid attention, I noticed the story being told in my brain was why. The internal complaining voice in my head, it seemed, always had an excuse for why I shouldn't want to do something. This could be running to a store, doing household chores, playing games, going to a park, deciding on where we go or what we do on vacation, or whatever might set off my grumbly, whining mind into disagreement. I needed to fix that. So, each morning I began telling myself that today I'm going to say yes more often and be willing, and simply go with the flow to whatever comes. Now, when someone asks me to do something, I practice pausing, going back to that desired narrative, and I try to say yes, especially when my mind is telling me it doesn't want me to do this or that. If I still struggle with the request, I remind my brain that I need to be willing and say yes. This has caused my mind to be more cooperative, less resistant, less grouchy. So if the stream of thoughts in my head is negative, I correct this narrative and choose not to resist by saying yes. And I usually have a great time. I hope these examples help you with your quest to change. With practice, I believe you too can transform the unwanted narrative going on in your head into what you really want it to be. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and watch my other videos as I will continue to share more of my experiences and practices.